Chapter 4. Do I have what it takes? Takes the DNA of a card counter. So it's just that easy. Master the steps and waltz into the nearest casino to win big as a card counter? Well, yes and number. Allow me to illustrate. I was driving into Las Vegas one day to host a blackjack boot camp when I received messages from two different blackjack players on my phone. I'd been in contact with both as they considered taking on card counting as a career opportunity. But while they both had blackjack in common, they couldn't have been more dissimilar. They embodied the yes and no of how easy it is to beat the game. More on this cautionary tale in a minute. First, let's talk about the yes. Popular culture, Hollywood in particular, has portrayed card counting as some high-minded art that only MIT whiz kids are capable of mastering. That is simply not true. Our blackjack team included blue-collar electricians, struggling writers, church pastors, and high school dropouts, many of whom won hundreds of thousands of dollars. Learning to count takes a mere fraction of the time required to become a programmer, doctor, or most any kind of working professional. The quick learning makes it a great added opportunity for the right person at any stage of life, whether as a hobby, investment, or profession. Now, let's discuss the number. Card counting is far from easy money. For starters, people tend to underestimate how long their training will take. "I'm going to train and test out in 2 weeks," one member of the church team vowed. He had a strong background in math, was a diligent student of the game, and was working toward his master's degree in marine biology. He was off by a mere 6 weeks. It took more than 2 months. It might be easier to become a card counter than a marine biologist, but it's no walk in the park. If you believe it is, it's the first sign you probably won't make it. There's truly no shame in discovering that you don't have what it takes to live the life of a card counter. Too many people, however, learn this lesson only after they've lost a chunk of change. Some people haven't learned the lesson yet. They're still out there playing a losing game. I want to prevent that from happening to you. So who is and isn't the right kind of person? What kind of individual has the chance to really make it? That brings us back to those 2 messages I received while driving to Las Vegas. Lance emailed me first. He was never willing to put in any solid training. He chose, instead, to play without investing time in his skills. Only after losing $12,000 did he acknowledge that he'd made a mistake and gambled away his money. Unfortunately, there wasn't a lot I could say to comfort him. If he was serious about beating the game, he needed to master the skills and follow the system perfectly. Furthermore, it would be a good idea to have his skills tested and verified before ever walking into a casino again. The second message was from a card counter who goes by JCrox111. He'd gotten into card counting as a side hustle, with a goal of winning $10,000 in his first year. I first met JCrox111 at one of our boot camps, where he wanted to get his skills verified. The point definitely isn't that he came to a boot camp, but in how he approached card counting. He trained hard, practicing mostly at home, and spent adequate low-stakes training time in casinos before ever risking his full bankroll. Being a real estate investor, he also realized it was worth investing in his skills before putting too much money into blackjack. His message to me came months later and he wanted to share his post-boot camp results. I just had to share this, man. Lol. I was stumbling through old notes on my phone. I started the year with a goal of $10,000 and 500 hours. He also sent some screenshots from his results spreadsheet. This is what a typical card counter's graph looks like. Ups and downs, but an upward trend over hundreds of hours. In the 5 months since attending, he was on track for meeting his hours. But instead of reaching his goal of $10,000, he'd earned $45,612 for an average of $265 an hour. If you're wondering if JCrox111 was simply experiencing some short-term success, he wasn't. He continued to update me with his playing results and sent me this message to let me know where things were not long after he passed the 500-hour mark. JCrox111 clearly put effort into mastering card counting, invested in his skills and training, and kept his eye on the long view. He didn't shortchange himself and jump into playing in the casinos before getting his skills evaluated. Am I saying you have to attend a blackjack boot camp to make it as a card counter? Number. But if you want to be successful, you do need to invest the time, energy, and possibly even some money in developing your skills and knowledge base to make sure you're playing like a pro and not just gambling with your bankroll. So what does it take? In my 15 years, I've come to believe a card counter needs 5 characteristics to succeed. I see them over and over in winning players and find them lacking in players who fall short. Do you have these characteristics? If not, what would it take for you to develop them? Characteristics of a card counter: obsessed with details when it comes to blackjack. A mentality of good enough isn't good enough. The margin for error is just too slight. Missing a single dealer payout error can wipe out several hours of perfect play. A basic strategy mistake here and a counting error there, and all of a sudden you're playing a losing game. If you don't have an obsession with the decisions you're making from one moment to the next, you might not have what it takes to be a pro. Do you tend to get easily distracted? If the pit boss asks, "Sir, what's your name?" Will you drop the count, or will you be able to shut him out until you've made sure you've locked the count in your head? If a slot machine starts ringing behind you, will you turn around to check it out, or will you ignore it until your round is over to make sure you don't miss a single card? If you get a blackjack on a $1,000 bet, will you jump up and down, high-fiving the old lady next to you? Or will you make sure you subtract 2 from your running count for the ace and face card before celebrating your win? You can't let emotions get in the way of your playing steps. Disciplined poker is an interesting game in that there isn't one perfect style. Some great poker players are aggressive, other great poker players are conservative. Some play tight, few hands, or loose, lots of hands. Since poker is based on outplaying the competition, you're trying to find a way to extract more value out of the competition than they extract out of you. Blackjack works differently. The beauty of card counting is in its mathematical precision. You're playing against a dealer who is forced to make the same decisions in all situations. This means that in blackjack, there's always exactly one correct way to play, and basic strategy tells you exactly what that is. Likewise, there's always exactly one running count, which gives you the one true count. Your true count tells you exactly what to bet and exactly when to deviate from basic strategy. If you're not highly disciplined in how you play, you won't be a successful card counter. Will you implement your bet spread precisely, even if you've lost 10 hands in a row? Will you be tempted to bet a little less if you're up a ton of money, just because you don't want to lose it all back? Will you hit a 15 against a 9? Even though you know you're likely to bust? Do you keep detailed records of your wins and losses? Do you have a system for keeping track of your money and chips? I often tell people that they must play like a computer, cold, calculated, self-controlled. There's nothing wrong with having emotions. But if you hand your emotions the steering wheel, it's only a matter of time before the car goes spinning off the highway. Handle Connect well. We've had players train and test out perfectly, full of excitement to start killing the casinos. Then, after one casino backrooms the more gives them a stern back off, they lose their nerve and quit the team. I remember the days of being afraid to ask the pit boss for a comped meal. This kind of fear must be overcome. You can't allow yourself to be easily intimidated. You'll be contending with dealers who don't like you, players telling you that you screwed up the whole table, dealer mistakes that you need to go to bat to rectify, and pit bosses tapping you on the shoulder and telling you you're through. Furthermore, you'll routinely have huge losses interspersed with the wins. If all of that is too stressful, that's fine, and perfectly normal. But you're better off putting your time into another pursuit. One member actually quit our team to become an air traffic controller after the stress of playing high-stakes blackjack was too much for him. I'm not joking, he thought it would be less stressful to shuffle airliners all day long. But if you don't easily get rattled, aren't looking for a risk-free lifestyle, and enjoy being David against Goliath, then you just may have what it takes. Won't get ground down by the casino environment. This may seem similar to the previous point about conflict, but let me explain. I know several players who didn't mind conflict and played perfect blackjack, but after a year or so just didn't want to spend another minute in a casino. Maybe they were raging introverts and being stuck in a sea of gamblers wore on them. Maybe they couldn't bear to see one more geriatric with an oxygen mask spending her social security check on slot machines. Whether because of the cigarette smoke and ceiling mirrors or the figurative smoke and mirrors, casinos aren't for everyone. Although I strongly dislike casinos, you won't find me there casually. Being in the environment doesn't bother me. I put my head down like a good soldier and just get to work. But if environment has a strong impact on the way you feel moment to moment, consider how much time you really want to spend in the windowless clock-free bowels of a casino. Bankroll. A card counter needs only 2 tools, a brain and a bankroll. You need the mental ability to play perfectly, but you also need enough capital to make it work. I hear a lot of people say, to have a realistic chance of making money at blackjack, you need $10,000. I disagree. I started with $2,000 and honestly, I don't think I ever used more than the first $500. I'm sure I got lucky at the beginning, but I was also willing to start very small and patiently grew my investment. On the other hand, while you may not need 5 figures, you also can't expect to start with $50. If you're underfunded, you'll have to take on high risk, low EV, or both. Are you the type of person who can first save up a small bankroll that you can afford to invest at the tables? The more money you have to start with, the better chance you'll have of weathering any potential losing streaks. Like any investor, to truly generate high EV, you need to be properly funded to give yourself a fighting chance. Overcoming fear. You know why you got into this. You want to take the casino's money. You've memorized the charts and perfected your game. You've gotten your bankroll together, scoped out the games at the local casinos, and now it's time to put it into action. You sit down at a table and go to work. The count hovers for a bit, but before long, it skyrockets. You raise your bet and after that hand, the count goes up even more. Time to raise to 3 units. Even more small cards come out and it's time for 6 units. The guy next to you makes a comment about how much you're betting, but after that round, the count has gone even higher. Only a few short minutes ago, you were betting 1 unit, but now it's time to bet 10 units. Are you going to do it? The shoe ended with your top bet out and it's time for the dealer to shuffle. Do you have the courage to drop back down to 1 unit to start the next shoe? When you feel like the pit boss, the dealer, surveillance, and the whole rest of the world are watching your every move, it doesn't matter how perfect your skills are unless you have the nerve to implement everything, you won't beat the game. I was a good example. Like I mentioned earlier, when I was first training at a casino, I was too timid to ask for a comp. Hey, Ben, would you ask the pit boss for a comp from me? What do you mean? Just do it yourself. Can you just do it for me? They know you and you're betting more than me. Number. I'm not asking for comps for you. If you want a free meal, go for it. A year later, everything had changed. I was asking the pit boss to reserve tables for me. I was getting table limits raised. I was having the dealer cut the shoe thinner. This has to do with deck penetration, which we'll get to soon, and could be found saying things like, "Oh, Mr. Pit Boss, if you wouldn't mind writing me a $200 comp to the fine dining room, I'd like to treat my wife to a nice dinner. Thanks." When I finally realized that the only way to make the job work was to face my fears, I did exactly that. If you want to make it as a card counter, I guarantee you'll have plenty of fears of your own to overcome. The experience is a bit different for everyone. What scares you the most about card counting? Security is mostly a superstition. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing. Helen Keller, take a minute and be honest with yourself. Is it the fear of conflict with the casino or other players at the table? The fear of getting backed off? The fear of what your friends and family think about what you're doing? Now consider if you have what it takes to overcome this fear. It can help to visualize your fear. What will you feel, literally in your body, when players complain about you? When the dealer is hustling you for a dip? When the phone is ringing in the pit? When the pit boss arrives flanked by security guards and asks you to step away from the table? Then, what will you do about it? Ironically, just like when I was afraid to ask for a comp, you're worried about nothing. Therapists and psychologists teach their clients how to use the cognitive part of their brain to overcome the emotional part. You can literally talk your way down from fear. You can also overcome fear through practice, commonly known as desensitizing. A common issue that comes up during training is that players feel pressure to make a decision at the blackjack table before they're ready. It can feel like a pressure cooker situation at the dealer and players are staring at you while you're updating the running count. Then you're silently considering your playing deviations and calculating the true count to arrive at a decision. Everyone else is expecting a decision faster than you're prepared to make it. So rather than taking the 10 seconds to formulate and execute the right decision, you give in to the pressure and just make a rush decision. This needs to be amended. To help trainees for the church team overcome this, we made them pause the game for a full minute when it was their turn to make a decision. Pausing the game for a minute feels like an absolute eternity when everyone is staring at you. Dealer, you have a 16. 3 seconds go by. Dealer, 16. Would you like to stand? 5 more seconds go by. Only 52 seconds to go. A broken bar, but what you learn from trying it is that you have nothing to be afraid of. The world doesn't collapse if you just sit there like an idiot for 60 seconds. And you actually feel empowered. You have the freedom to make the right decision, however long it takes. The dealer, the other players, the bosses, the whole universe literally cannot do anything until you've made a hand signal. So the next time you need an extra 10 seconds to make the correct decision, remember that getting the decision right is all that matters. All it takes is to overcome the emotional pressure. Then it's a breeze to make the right play. Contrast this with the cost of not overcoming the fear. You won't play properly, you won't bet properly, and instead of a disciplined investor, you'll be a gambler relying on instinct and hope instead of math. The reality is that everyone experiences fear. If someone claims he's fearless, he's either lying to you or lying to himself. The only question is how you'll handle your fear. Most likely, the risks involved in trying to mitigate your fear aren't as great as the risks of doing nothing about it. Reading homework for a truly inspiring story of fearless card counting. Read Repeat Until Rich by Josh Axelrod. The RST half is about his experiences with a large-scale blackjack team, and how they relentlessly attacked casinos in the face of fear. The second half is about his battle with online poker addiction, which is fascinating and worth reading for very diverse negation rent reasons. Can you overcome your fears? Be brutally honest with yourself. If you're certain that you can't or you're not sure if you can, that's okay, but card counting probably isn't for you. If you believe you can, I guarantee you'll be glad for the experience. Speaking for myself, I'm a different person because of how card counting taught me to face fear, along with conflict, uncertainty, and wild emotional and financial swings. The lessons I've learned from card counting have extended far beyond the blackjack tables and casinos. They've challenged me to grow, to become a much more confident and whole person. Question and answer time. Below are some questions you may be asking yourself at this point. Q. What if the pit boss says no? A. Who cares? Shrug it off. Or if you really can't handle rejection, take your chips and move on. Q. What if I'm backed off? A. Then it's on to the next casino. You're there to beat them at blackjack, not for social reasons, and certainly not to be their favorite person. Q. What if the other players start complaining about how I play? A. The other players are there to lose money. You're there to win money. Don't let gambling logic get under your skin. My preferred strategy is to play dumb. Remember, reasoning with a gambler is an effort in futility. For example, if a gambler says to me, "You really shouldn't double a soft 18 against a 6. You're messing up a winning hand," I just say, "Hey, I'm here to gamble. This is just how I play." Q. What if I just lost the last 10 hands? Should I change my strategy? A. No. We champion math, not streaks, hunches, or superstitions. We follow the system like robots, playing and betting perfectly hand after hand after hand. Q. Aren't there risks involved in moving your bets from 1 to 20 units and back? A. Sure there are. But the risks are greater from not doing what you set out to do. At the end of the day, you need to ask yourself if you'll be more disappointed if you get backed off or if you don't play in a way that makes you money. If it's the former, then be honest with yourself and realize that you're more interested in being a gambler than an investor. Q. Don't you think it was risky to trust the people on your blackjack team with large amounts of money? Couldn't they just steal it and not get caught? A. Absolutely. And we did everything in our power to mitigate that risk. But if we would have let that particular fear paralyze us and never run the blackjack team, we would be guaranteeing failure before we even started. Summing up, while pessimists say you can't make money from card counting unless you're some kind of savant, it's just not true. I know plenty of successful card counters making upwards of multiple six figures a year. But it takes the right kind of person to have success at the tables. Without the proper skills and personality, you likely won't make it. But for the right kind of person, there are more casinos than any time in US history and money waiting to be taken from them. Whether it's the right fit for you is up to you to decide. Card counting isn't just a man's world. A semi-pro. How did you get into card counting? I was working as a blackjack dealer when I learned about advantage play. I dealt cards to an AP. Over time, we became friends and then boyfriend and girlfriend. In the beginning, we talked all the time, bonding over our shared casino experiences, weird working hours, and his strange life as a card counter. I don't even think I'd seen the movie 21 at that point, so it was a whole new world for me. When we started dating a few months into knowing each other, I remember saying that I would never try card counting, but I'd also said the same thing about dealing blackjack. At one point, we were brainstorming about jobs and lifestyles and I said something to the diaresis negation of, well, what if I just learned to count? The rest is history. A year and some change after meeting, I was training to play with his bankroll and, less than 6 months after that, I was playing as a full-time high-stakes AP. How did you like being a dealer? Being a blackjack dealer was a trip. I loved the process of learning to deal blackjack and other casino games more than anything. My time actually dealing to casino patrons was a mixed bag. In the beginning, it was really fun and the diaresis negation rent, but the hours were challenging. I worked graveyard shift for the majority of my time as a dealer. I'd never felt more isolated in my life and I haven't since. I was perpetually sleep deprived and dehydrated. I drank a lot during that period of my life. My mom used to pray with her friends that the job would be so terrible, I'd be forced to quit. I worked in a smallish tribal casino that was kind of in the middle of nowhere. Dealers kept their own tips, so depending on the day of the week or the time of year, I either made hundreds of dollars in a night or literally zero. I was 22. And while overall I was making more money than I ever had before, the inconsistency could be intimidating at times. The overwhelming majority of nights were rough. On the nights when nothing happened, I remember standing on dead tables for 8-hour shifts counting dead light bulbs on slot machines. I remember thinking, I can't do this for another night. Almost every work night. On nights when the casino wasn't empty, you never knew what was going to happen. Starting work at 1 a.m. often meant that patrons were belligerently intoxicated when I started my shift. They could be verbally abusive and physically dangerous at times, and I observed that people behave really strangely when they know you can't walk away from them. When I started working at the casino, the security diaresis negation was extremely supportive, protective, and didn't tolerate much. There was also a lot of support from the pit bosses and table games manager. But that changed when people moved on and new ones came in. Then, if someone spoke in a dangerous or abusive way, you were kind of on your own. By the time I left, table games felt like the Wild West. I was threatened, grabbed, called names. Fun nights, however, when players were respectful, when the casino wasn't dead, when I was making money, were so fun. It was like being paid to party. Overall, it was a learning experience that I wouldn't trade, but sometimes I still feel sad when I think back and remember some of the things I experienced there. What was it like going from the dealer's side of the table to the player's side? Any particular struggles? Did your background make anything particularly easier? It was weird. I thought it would be very diaresis negation rent, but it wasn't. I also thought it would be easier, but I actually think that being a dealer was easier in many ways. You can't be back to idiaresis negation of your job as a dealer. You don't have to wait for a positive count to start working. You can't exactly make the idiaresis negation cult players leave when you're dealing, but you can't always walk away when you're playing blackjack either. If the count is high and you're playing at a table with someone who is making you emotionally or physically uncomfortable, there's still that same sense of being trapped, because even though you could choose to walk away, you really can't. Sometimes you've waited all day for that high count. I had this idea that being a patron and playing big would come with certain privileges. My boyfriend doesn't experience too much interference from other players or dealers. If he's losing and he's quiet, they leave him alone. But playing with a big bankroll or losing big in a session has never bought me silence or privacy. I almost always experience a running dialogue from dealers, players, and bystanders. Why did you do that? Actually, she made the right decision. You should get up now. Where did you get all this money? Once, I won a large double down slash split slash deviation hand that must have looked strange or something, and someone walking by literally told me to leave the casino. Dealers seem to expect more conversation from female players if I'm not talkative or engaging. I get the vibe that the idiaresis negation feels like I'm rude instead of just quiet or private. There's a lot of sexism from customers in idiaresis negation. Not. How many times have I heard, "You don't look like a gambler"? People didn't question me being in a casino when I was a blackjack dealer, but I feel like I'm constantly questioned now. What was your card counting training like? I started memorizing the charts in November 2015. My boyfriend blew up and laminated the BJA basic strategy chart and a couple of deviation charts for me to study. He wasn't with me to explain the charts or walk me through it, and they didn't really make a lot of sense until he gave me the charts written out as sentences, also from BJA. I memorized those basic strategy pages verbatim by handwriting them out entirely 3 or 4 times at least. Those sentences were the key to unlocking the charts for me. They pulled everything together. In December, my boyfriend and I met up for a vacation in Minnesota. He was frustrated, because it didn't appear to him that I was consumed with my training or taking it seriously enough. Well, I took out a notebook and wrote out all the basic strategy rules, verbatim, no errors, on the spot. I think it reassured him that I was taking it seriously and that I'd be able to master the technical skills necessary to do the work. I have a very visual memory, not fully photographic perhaps, but I do think in pictures. I can see the charts in my mind. At the end of January 2016, I quit my job and we stayed at his apartment for a stretch of time. We decided it would be less expensive and more idiaresis negation active to stay in one place and really focus on training, instead of trying to do it on the road while he was working. Because of my years of dealing, my hand recognition and game mechanics were strong before we even began training. I looked more polished and proficient than I truly was. Our original plan was to play after 200 hours of training. But after only 40 V50 hours of my boyfriend dealing to me, he decided I was ready to play in the casino. We drove to a riverboat to play full stakes, which was 2 hands of $1,000. I didn't even get through the RST round without losing the count. A few hands in, he asked me for the count and I told him. It was so wrong. Not idiaresis negation by a little bit, but like completely wrong. A hand or two later he checked again. Still wrong. He leaned in and calmly, but not happily, whispered, "What's happening?" I not so calmly panic whisper yelled, "I told you I wasn't ready." We aren't even halfway through training. Despite my mistakes, the casino was still alarmed by the action and we stood out from the old-timer regulars, and they countermeasured us. We went back to training after that experience and I completed the majority of the remaining 150 hours on blackjack training software. What should card counters know about dealers, casinos that they might not be aware of? Probably that there's no tip you can give to a majority of dealers that will satisfy them. Period. Casinos are the idiaresis negation cult places to work. There's usually a mindset of lack. Casinos condition their employees to expect tips from patrons. If you receive a tip from a patron once, you assume that the tips are going to keep rolling in. Dealers who keep their tips are competitive and often compare nightly wages. It's easy to get caught up with feeling ungrateful because of the environment, and it's the majority mindset. It's contagious. If a casino pools tips, the amount you'd have to tip for it to make a significant impact on the dealer standing in front of you is substantial. The best thing you can give to a dealer, that has the most impact, is being decent to kind or just quiet, not getting angry or blaming your dealer when you lose. I get that losing sucks, but blaming your dealer for math makes absolutely no sense to me. They might not thank you, and some dealers have poopy attitudes no matter what you do. Even nice dealers still might be disappointed if they see you playing big and not tipping. It's important to realize this about the dealers who are openly angry at you for not tipping. You can't idiaresis negation or to buy them. The margins are too small. Even if you could theoretically idiaresis negation or to buy them, it still wouldn't be enough. They'd likely be angry with or without the money. The other thing is casinos are unpredictable. Shifts are inconsistent, there's a ton of turnover, People shoe idiaresis negation around. Sometimes the pit sta idiaresis negation have a past in surveillance. Other times some dealers and OR supervisors are AP enthusiasts, but I'd say that's rare. The majority of employees in the majority of casinos know little to nothing about advantage play. If you play in a medium to small casino and you get the sense that the dealers or pit bosses are paying attention to you, they probably are, but not because you're an AP or they're suspicious of you. Casinos aren't constantly busy, and when it's boring, you people watch. I spent minutes, hours, days people watching. There's no need to be paranoid. Just remember that being noticed doesn't automatically mean they know what you're doing. You started idiaresis negation playing on a large bankroll. Was it tough throwing large bets out there right away? Did you have a period of time to ramp up to high stakes? It really wasn't tough throwing out large bets. First, I was already pretty desensitized to the cash and chips after being a dealer, plus years of cash handling and jobs before that. There was also a disconnect between the bankroll chips and cash and actual money. 30 grand in my pocket didn't feel like a new car, college tuition, or the down payment on a house, because it wasn't. In my mind, bankroll isn't money, and neither are chips. They're betting units. That RST riverboat session during training was alarming for the idiaresis negation rent reasons. I didn't want to make any errors, and it didn't matter if I was betting $5 or $500. I wanted to be perfect. After that, I was pretty adamant that I wanted to play a few probationary low-stakes sessions to test nerves, accuracy, holding the count, and emotional discipline. I had 3 low-stakes mini-sessions before I was apparently convinced that I wasn't going to bomb. But then, during my RST real session, as soon as I sat down at the game, I immediately had to go to the bathroom and throw up from nerves. I came back, a beverage server brought me a cup of tea, and I was knee after that. My boyfriend stood behind the table and watched me for a half shoe or so. I played perfectly at full stakes, no count errors, all the deviations. He was pretty surprised, but I passed, and he left me to play other tables for the rest of the session. I was blessed with some positive variance at the beginning of my AP career, and by the time I had some substantial losses, I was able to handle it, because I knew I had a winning game. From the beginning, the big bets, the mechanics of the game, the wins and losses were never the challenging parts. I was able to go into what I jokingly call trauma zen and compartmentalize, roll with the swings, and trust the math. How do you think you've been treated idiaresis negation recently, being a female card counter? Casino patrons are the most challenging part of AP life for me, but I think in general, all people in the casino, patrons and sta idiaresis negation alike, didn't respect my personal space and boundaries as much as they would have if I were male. Other players would get too close to me, ask me inappropriate questions about who I am, why I'm there, the source of my money. I often got the vibe that dealers and players kind of resented me for playing with large sums of money, but it nightly got even worse when they realized I wasn't going to dip. It was like they thought it was my boyfriend's money or someone else's money, so because I didn't earn it, I should be giving it to them instead of throwing it away at a casino. Also, the idiaresis negation are less routine as a woman. Some were more kind because of my gender, but many felt like the person backing me idiaresis negation was more aggressive or angry, a how dare you kind of vibe at times, as opposed to the sense of respect or relative idiaresis negation rents that I feel like my male counterparts experience fairly often. My idiaresis negation happen quicker than my boyfriends do most of the time. You stand out more as a female card counter, because lone females in casinos are outliers. I once asked Tommy Highland if the female players on his team had any common playing experiences that the idiaresis negation had from his male players, and he said a main one was that it took casinos a lot longer to forget about them. I frequently experienced power struggles with the cage ladies over showing ID, but I don't necessarily think that has anything to do with being a card counter. It's more about being a young woman in a casino with more than a couple $100. Any advice for other card counting women out there? If this becomes your full-time gig, don't slack on your self-care. Prioritize sleep, eat as cleanly as you can. It's tough on the road, but your body will thank you, and it'll help with avoiding burnout. Try to stay hydrated even though it's tempting to drink less water, so as to not have to take bathroom breaks in the casino or stop while driving. EV is important, but replenishing yourself is essential. Really be in touch with your why, your engine behind doing this work and motivation for living this lifestyle. Community is important. Connect with another female AP if you can. I never got involved with the message boards and I regret it. I didn't have support from my family, and the AP lifestyle distanced me from my friends at times, because they didn't understand my life. It was hard not to have anyone to talk to other than my partner. If you're entering into a working relationship with another person, be very clear from the start about what that means, be it a partnership, an employee-employer relationship, manager-team, etc. The working relationship with my romantic partner was challenging at times, and I think a lot of that had to do with ambiguity around the boundary of what was work time and what wasn't. Things can evolve over time, but I think having a clear picture going in of what you want and expect is valuable. This goes without saying, but be very aware of your surroundings. If you're alone, if you feel unsafe, ask to be escorted by security to your car when you plan to leave the property. Despite being alone, I have never felt at risk of being robbed or hurt while playing. I'm very discreet with my cash and chips. I carry a $15 purse from Sears and I dress down. I think if you're a female playing alone at the blackjack tables, you might never blend in, but you can attempt to stand out less. Any epic stories you'd like to share? We went on an international trip last year and ended up winning over $100,000 from a small club that was allegedly owned and run by the mob. The RST night we played, we were down $50,000 or so at one point. It was the easiest game we've ever played and we got slaughtered. We ended up making the money back, but the swings were nauseating. The RST night, we kept our chips, over $60,000 worth, and the next day they tried to cash us out in 20s and FTIs. The club had a rule that they could cash you out only in big bills if you bought in with big bills, and that they would hold those exact bills and give them back to you the same playing day only. There was a language barrier, but they explained that it had something to do with avoiding money laundering charges. We'd bought in with €100 notes the day prior, and the idea of being paid out in 20s and FTIs, the sheer volume of the bills and everyone seeing us carrying them, wasn't great. They worked something out for us that night, but it was stressful. We played there for around 20 days total. They were open for only part of the day, and around 3 every morning they brought in freshly baked chocolate mini pastries. They were the best I've ever had. 3 old white guys ran the place. They owned it or announced it. Something like that. There was a stern well-dressed businessman with glasses, a huge guy with a pockmarked face and squinty eyes who looked like a cartoon gangster villain, and a short man who came in with his Bernese Mountain Dog and walked through the club banked by 2 enormous young suited security men who looked like KGB. One night, the gangster guy was running the show. He never smiled at us and he looked drunk every time I saw him. We were super scared of him. My boyfriend sometimes purchased an ice cream while we were playing and that night, I had a bite of his ice cream and got some on my face. Moments later, I looked over and saw a scary guy walking toward me quickly and wordlessly. He got so close that he was touching both my boyfriend and me. He smashed a napkin into my face, wiping the ice cream that was no longer there anyway, and exploded into laughter, yelling like a baby. The casino star Idiaris Negation nearby laughed with him, and the dealer laughed. My boyfriend and I laughed nervously. We were Terry-Ed. I don't know if I've ever been more scared in my life. Any life lessons you have learned from Advantage Play? Opportunity is everywhere. I'm kind of joking, but the longer I spend in this space, the more stories I hear about ending opportunity where you wouldn't expect it. Be curious, look for loopholes, but also be smarter than your mind and make sure that what you want to be there is actually there, especially with advanced Advantage Plays. If you spend a lot of time looking for something that you want to ND, eventually your brain is going to try to trick you into thinking a situation is pro-table or good enough. I've seen with my own eyes the very real possibility of a lucrative successful profession outside of the conventional rat race. You can create freedom of schedule, but there are no shortcuts. You have to work hard for this life. I like that math can be applied in this way. I like it as a main hustle, as a side hustle, and as a hobby. I like seeing that being determined and nose to the grindstone, putting in the hours, and getting it done is more valuable than waxing poetic about the math theory. I had a teacher who told her students, the world rewards people who get Idiaris Negation done. Talking about card counting isn't the same as actually going out and doing it. I've learned that even though so many people think this skill set is weird and cool and exciting, other APs look down on card counting, which is just another way of saying you can't please everyone. I didn't realize how much of a tendency I have toward being a people pleaser until working as an AP. I learned the value of questioning why I feel like I need to do something or say something or behave in a certain way. The casino tries to make you feel like what you're doing is wrong, and I learned in a very real way that I'm the only one who can advocate for myself every day and that I can't rely on other people to do it for me. I think there's power in that.